Hi, I'm Ed Parcaut, the host of Helping the Brave, and let's welcome our guest today, Doug, or D. Paul Fleming, as he goes by in the author world. How you doing today, sir?
I'm doing well. I'm doing well, my friend. Thank you for having me on.
I appreciate it. Thanks for coming on. Helping the Brave is all about helping us, veterans, and because I feel we're not heroes, we're just brave. We run towards danger instead of we don't think we're heroes, but other people do. So that's how I take it. So, all right. So what service were you in?
Navy.
Yeah,
Navy.
I know we already talked beforehand, but the other people weren't there with us.
So I was out in San Diego for boot and A and advanced school a few years before you were, and being so I'm from the East Coast, a winter in San Diego was a summer to me. So we were swimming in Mission Beach in February and kicking the sand.
Yeah, well, the ocean's not that much colder in the winter or summer. It's the same temperature, 65 degrees. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a bath to us.
Yeah, and that's why I learned to dive was down there. And when you learn to dive in that water and how dirty and mucky and you can't see anything, they ask you when you go diving throughout the world, where'd you learn that? You say San Diego, like, oh, you're fine. But if you say like Hawaii, they're worried about you. So because you can see so well. All right. So what was your specialty in the Navy?
So I did interior communications. I went into the submarine corps. I was actually on the USS Dallas, SSN 700. Does that ring a bell?
Nope.
You ever see the movie Hunt for Red October?
Yep. That was it.
My boat. Spent 3 years, 2 months on that. Deployed 2 years, 1 month.
Wow. Were you claustrophobic at all?
Right until they shut the hatch. Once they shut that hatch and we had already cut lines with the tender. We were in halfway around the world. I met the boat in Diego Garcia, a little dot of an island in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And you lose your claustrophobia real quick when they shut the hatch and submerge.
You don't have a choice, right?
Right?
Yeah. Why did you pick the Navy?
So that's a great story, right?
I don't know. You haven't told it yet.
Well,
I'll let you know afterwards.
It's a great story. Okay, I kind of smirk because I just got done writing it in my next book, and actually in a book I just released it talks a little bit about it. But I had a gentleman who was a well-groomed former Marine, perfect tie, and he had a
sorry. There are no former Marines. They're just Marines. Just so let's get that clear.
Well,
I was stationed with him. I can tell you that. All right.
He walked around with a gavel on his bench, so he said former. I'm gonna trust him on his.
Okay.
But he was encouraging me to come back to his presence with enlistment papers, and I tried to go in Marine Corps, but I was living on my own from the age of 14, and I was 17 and facing two options: go in the military or go somewhere else. So my mother was willing to sign for the Navy, but not the Marine Corps. So Navy it was.
It's still the department. Marine Corps is a department of the Navy. Didn't your mom know that?
Apparently not.
Well, I didn't. I didn't at all. I was the worst. I had no idea until I watched the Army Navy game. People laugh at me because it's like, hey, I joined the Navy because they offered me to be a corpsman. None of the other services would. So that's why I joined. Yeah. And that's why my son joined the Army, because when he went to Air Force first and all those, they wouldn't guarantee him his job. And so it went, but the Army guaranteed his job. Yeah. It just worked for me. So. Right. So, sure. All right. So how long were you in?
So I was on a 6-year ride, 4 active, 2 reserve. I got hurt about the 3-year point, and at my 4-year EAOS, I had a choice. I could either sit back and wait for the Navy to figure out what was wrong, or they were going to discharge me to VA. And I took the discharge, and then started my 4-decade run of dealing with the VA.
And so are you an expert at dealing with the VA now?
Yeah. So at one point, I actually had the secretary of the VA's email and cell phone, because in the long run of what I've been doing, I became a pretty aggressive advocate, and I still am. I mean, I teach vets how to reach out to DC and how to reach out to your chief of staff at your local VA and stop screwing around. Go right to the top and raise hell until you get the treatment you're after.
How do you teach them that? Do you give classes?
No, pick up the phone and, well, I do it. Most of the stuff I do is one-on-one. I keep getting asked to do more and more presentations, which is kind of something I'm working on. But most of my work has been one-on-one or small groups, and sometimes I'll just pick up the phone and call I should say more times than not, I'll pick up the phone and call the chief of staff in whatever state it is. And a handful of states know me. So when their secretary answers and they know it's me, sometimes they chuckle, sometimes they sigh.
They just tell you to leave your stick outside the door. So,
no, right?
Walking tall,
right.
Error, so.
Oh, I hear you. I hear you.
What was your? Because for me, that I don't know if you're listening to shows, but I would love to scrap the VA and just give us everybody insurance and have it pay out at 120% and be done with it, and they could take it anywhere better than Medicaid, Medi-Cal, all that stuff, and you could take it anywhere. And I think that's the best. That would be the best. Because right now, because I've had a couple people who worked for the VA for 30 years, and the President Trump came out and said you can go anywhere, but they have to get referred. They can't. It's got to get approved before they can go anywhere, and so they still have a backlog.
Yeah. So, again, this is where I say stop screwing around. Call the chief of staff, because the VA will kind of circle jerk you and play that game, and then they'll try to, they'll want to make the appointment and they'll want to pick the doctor. And what I do is, in 2018 was the first time that I got private care, and that's the first time I started getting answers for my physical injuries, and it was life-changing for me. It actually started me on my path to finding peace when I could get private care. And to dovetail that, I'm working on an HR to implement the I Need Help bill, which will authorize, starting with an executive order, hopefully when this next administration comes in, and turning it into a law that says any veteran, regardless of status, who says I need help has immediate and instantaneous access to any mental health provider anywhere, and the VA pays for it without having to go to the VA to get approval. Just go to your mental health provider, and the VA from there has to pick up the government's position on how much and so on and so on. But I'm a firm believer, and I don't mean to take over your show, but I support you and anybody who says we need to dismantle the VA and break it down to its primeval core and then leave it at that. There is so much rampant corruption, and supra constitutional funding where they steal the money. $6.8 billion was given them to them to solve the suicide problem, and they didn't solve it. They made it worse. So again, let me step off of my soapbox.
No. Stay on your soapbox. What you don't know about me is the president of my Rotary this year, and my causes was veteran causes to help in our local community, especially to bring awareness to the suicide that we have issue, where we lost more vets since 9/11 than the last 3 wars put together. And, I had Operation Surf come over and talk about how they help veterans with PTSD. And they have a documentary called Resurfaced on Netflix. It's a really good documentary. Then I had another gentleman talk about, he was in the prison system because he was a Marine for 10 years, got out, got incarcerated for 23 years. During that period of time, he created a program for vets to never get reincarcerated again. And that's been doing really well. But then my next thing I did was called Operation Firewalk, where I put on a firewalk for veterans. It was a 2-day event. Each day was a separate firewalk for veterans each day. And I have another one coming up May 3rd of 2025.
Wow.
And you're gonna be there so you can talk about this to veterans. So, but
where are you looking? What are you booking me for? May 3rd, when? 25?
May 3rd, 2025.
All right.
It's a Saturday. It's a Saturday. Yeah, so it's in Modesto, California. That's the only thing.
You think it'll still be there?
It's like California, like going back down to San Diego. It's only like 8 hours away, but that's beside the point.
Listen, I'll go anywhere to help fellow vets and their families. Okay, a lot of the work I do is with their families because so few vets are willing to talk about trauma and what they're dealing with. That
Yep.
I'm encouraging people to read the book as a family or a friend so that you can understand what's happening to veterans and the mental health issues. So, but listen, I'm in. So, what can I do? Where can I be? How can I help?
You just
Right?
need to be there for the day. You can talk for about 45 minutes about how, what you want to talk about and how you can help. But I'd like to read your book and see if we want to give it out during the event. So
Yeah, let me mail you a couple copies of it so you we
only
can
if you
talk
sign it.
offline.
Only if you sign it.
You got it, brother. You got it. Happy
So
to sign it for you.
what I normally do is I ask authors to sign their book, send me a copy, and then I buy a copy and give it to somebody else. I'm not one of those cheapskates because I have my own book out, Financial Freedom: Building Personal Wealth Through Home Ownership. Talks about how to get a home. Like veterans need to get first benefit. One of the things you need to do is own a home, own real estate. It's the only way to protect yourself in this market, especially with this current administration increasing the inflation rate. So,
Oh, I hear you.
yeah.
I hear
So
you.
the problem is only you and I understood what inflation was because of our age. Because it was the last election, 42, it was 42 years ago before inflation was here. And so you had to be 55 or older to understand what inflation was. They had no idea. So nobody
18%
knew.
mortgage rates.
Yeah. Nobody had a clue. What are you talking about? We just had low rates forever. Everything's great. No, you will have no idea when this thing hits you. You will know. So,
Yep.
and
They're
yeah.
learning now.
Yeah, they are. And that's what that's what we needed. This is what happened in the 70s with Carter. Eventually we had Ronald Reagan came in and fixed, he wasn't fixed for everything. You can't fix everything. But he tried. So, and he was a funny president. I didn't know how funny he was until I seen some of his reels from back in the day. I don't know if you ever seen any of his stuff. He has so many jokes. It's ridiculous.
I don't. I served like you under him, and I was in Libya the first time we went after Gaddafi, and but I never really picked up on his humor.
I didn't either. And it was later clips that he had produced that, that he had said it because we weren't at all the, press dinners. They didn't have internet like we have now. They didn't have the TV that we have now where you get everything. Back then you had to been there.
So
but the most important thing is just go ahead.
So I take it you're veterans for Trump.
I'm a veteran for change. Yes.
Well, Gunny Jesse, who's a retired Marine on Newsmax, she's on point for Veterans for Trump. Kind of helping her. No, I shouldn't say that. I'm doing what I can to help promote her trade on that piece.
So what do you? This is my coin for Rotary.
Oh man, that's pretty cool.
And then so I'll send you one of those. My other side is the Challenge 22, which is to reach out to 22 veterans a week, see how they're doing. If you don't know 22 veterans, reach out to 22 people a week and see how they're doing. Reaching out helps out a lot. It can change people's lives.
So back when I was part of the original Vet Force is the organization that got Public Law 109-461 on the book, commonly called the Vet First Contracting Act, which requires the VA to hire veterans first on all contracting. And in turn, George Bush signed Executive Order 13360, which mandates 3% of all spending or all government spending goes to veteran-owned, disabled veteran-owned business. So what I'm regenerating is Vet Force 2.0 to start going after the VA, starting with the mental health issue. And then I'm going to continue until I drop dead, fighting to dismantle the VA one piece at a time by privatizing care, like you had mentioned at the beginning.
It makes the perfect sense. I mean, why do we want to look at the post office? I mean, can we it's throwing more money at this stuff doesn't fix it. It makes it worse. And that's like this current administration throwing as much money as they did. How much more money do we need to give Ukraine? You know what I mean? It's like, and my biggest problem, they need to one of those 1,000-page bills slide term limits in there because they don't read it anyway. And then we would fix this problem, because if you had term limits, the lobbyists would not give these people that much money. You wouldn't have a bartender who went in and now she's worth $20 million. AOC.
A horrible bartender, by the way.
I don't know. I know.
Okay.
I didn't get served by her, so I don't know. Yeah, she probably was pretty good at it. All right. So where are you located?
I'm on the East Coast.
Where?
I'm actually in Connecticut.
Okay.
I was born and raised here. Navy, joined the Navy. They sent me to San Diego, and then sent me to the USS Dallas, which was tied up in Groton.
You know, they were really messed up back then because they would send people from the West Coast to the East Coast and people from the East Coast to the West Coast. You know, it was the dumbest thing because I was stationed. So when we went through boot and then Corps School in San Diego, everybody in our class got East Coast billets. I was supposed to be in North Carolina during the period of time where they had the problem with that water. And luckily, the top 3 people in the class, our senior chief was like, okay, I made so much, you know, got top 3 people billets in California. I got Camp Pendleton. The other one's got San Diego Balboa. I made it out because Marine Corps base, Navy hospital was the best thing. Nobody ever messed with me about my hair, none of that stuff. And, you know, everybody said if they have a problem, they have them come see me. So, yeah, I had the longest hair in the Navy than I've ever had, but I knew the regs. I couldn't have made it on a ship. And that was, so when you talked about what you did, I was in 18 months and they're like, okay, it's time for you to either go to a ship or go to a specialty school. And my first thing I said was, what specialty school is not on a ship? And they said, it's physical therapy. And I'm like, hey, that sounds like a good thing for me to do. And so I went to physical therapy school at Fort Sam Houston, Texas, in San Antonio, and came back and got stationed at Camp Pendleton. I was in 5 years, 5 months, and 14 days. I was on the same thing as you, 4 and 2. You know, the 6 years. That was that thing in the 80s. That's what they gave everybody, 4 and 2.
Yep.
And I had to extend because of the specialty school, which was the best thing I ever did. So, and
So
then I got my bachelor's and master's from the Navy. So
now you're a physical therapist?
Hell no, I threw all that away and got in the mortgage industry. Well, because the problem is I would have had to gone to school to get the bachelor's and master's in it to be able to do it out on the outside, which I could do on the inside. That's the other thing that needs to get changed. I had a gentleman on here who actually works through some stuff, and he's going in the Pentagon area, and he's like, yeah, it needs to change. If you got a skill in the Navy or in any military, that should translate directly outside to the civilian world. And they need to make that change. That's something else, because you can get an engineer that came out of the military and they can't even get a job as an engineer.
And do you know why?
No, why?
I'm asking. I'm not.
Oh, I just think it's not really. The only way that works is if they go to like one of the big contractors, right, in the military contractors and those Honeywell and those, the big companies like that. They'll kind of understand it. But if you want to get a job anywhere else, they don't understand the difference, right? What you learn in the military and what you learn in school. So what they need to do is there needs to be a way to blend that if you get out and you get this thing that says, okay, you have this school because of this, and this, and this.
Right. I think I know what you're referring. I think I'm tracking it, because Seabees trying to come into the private sector. Guys that were doing construction battalion in the Navy, and some of them I was in boot camp with, trying to fit into the private sector, because I went into construction after, and it's two different worlds. So when I ended up doing federal contracting, construction federal contracting, you can see where a Seabee would fit into that federal piece, doing military work, but it was not a match in transitioning to the private sector. I mean, short of running equipment and so on, but.
Right. But I mean, but it should make it easier for guys to be able to get out. Because one of the guys at the last event that we had, the first inaugural Operation Firewalk, I was talking, he'd been out for 6 months. He's like, I can't even get a job. I was an engineer and it doesn't translate the same way, even though I can do the same job. It's just, they don't understand.
So how did you get into firewalking? Is it a spiritual thing? Is it a confidence thing? Talk to me.
No, what happened was I do a lot through Podmatch. I have another podcast called Inner Edison. Your greatest accomplishments come from your greatest, I can't even talk today. I need to go home. So it's your greatest accomplishments come from your greatest defeats. So it's like for business owners and stuff like that. And there's a gentleman named Dave Albin. I interviewed him through Podmatch, and he was on there and he was talking about what he went through. He was an alcoholic. He got clean. And then one of his buddies who helped him, he's like, hey, we're going to a Tony Robbins event. He went to a Tony Robbins event. He then started volunteering for the firewalking stuff, because he did the firewalk even though he didn't want to do it. And then he ran Tony Robbins Firewalk as the captain for like 15 years. And so when he was being interviewed, and one of the ladies who had a veteran podcast go, "Have you done a firewalk for veterans?" And when I was talking, he was explaining this. I'm going, "I'm in. I want to do it for veterans because it's the limiting beliefs. It's getting through your bullshit." And I'm telling you, everybody walked was like, "Holy cow, that was amazing." And that's the same thing I want to do again this year. But I want to do a 1-day event this year so we did a 2-day event. And the reason we did that was the second Saturday was for veterans. Friday was for everybody who helped put it on. So they understood what veterans were going to go through the next day. But then it blended. Everybody came either day. So this next one and we had Dave Albin talk about how to do the firewalk and a bunch of stuff about that. And then we had Dave Sanderson, who was the last guy who got off that flight that went into the Hudson, how he helped everybody. Great. I really loved the people who was here, but I want this time to be more about veterans and what they've been through and how they came out on the other side to help other vets understand that. And that's why I want you there. So the firewalk is really, if you haven't done a firewalk, it's really hard to explain. Yes, if you go at a steady pace, you don't burn your feet. But to get through that, it's like a lot of stuff that's limiting our beliefs and what we can do and what we can't do. We get in our own way, and that's what this is about, is getting out of your own way.
Yeah, that's truth to word right there. That is truth to word. Getting out of our own way.
Yeah, so it helps a lot. I mean, and the California sod, that's the only problem is like the first night when they took pictures of it, the video and stuff, you couldn't see the coals. California sod is so thick and have so many different grasses in it. But the second night it was pounded down from everybody walking on it. So they bring sod out and put the coals on the sod and they keep adding more hot coals through, as you go. And the second night you could really see the glow and the coals, which was there the first night, but you had to be over it. As you were walking, you could see it. And I did it both nights. And we gave, oh man, I don't have it. Oh, here it is. We gave away this lighter, which was a replica of the 1940s lighters that people took to war, that the vets put in their pocket so they could remember home. And our Rotary was the sponsor of it. See, I don't know if you can see it. And then it says, "I walked on April 12th and April 13th, either day." So it's a pretty good event. People enjoyed it. And so we have such a buy-in from the community now, but with the problem that people have on putting these things on is if you try to do it in a city, the city government doesn't want to set a precedence. And so I fought my city for 4 months and then finally went to the county, and the county's like, "I don't care." Since we put it on the county, and nobody gave us a hard time. We did it at this beautiful Richard's Ranch. It was a barn that had been put together by the family and everything else. It was beautiful. The dad was a vet, and he passed away, and the community came and put it together so they could have his celebration of life at it. And then they rent it out. And so we did it there, and it was a great event. And I want to do it again now, but have 4 or 5 different keynote speakers talking about different things. One would be what you do and talk about. You can talk about your service, but you can talk about what, how to deal with the VA and deal with that kind of stuff. Because we even had active duty people there. I'm in Modesto. There's not maybe 6% of the population might be veterans. It's not like San Diego. It's not like Texas and other places, because they got rid of all the bases up here. So, but we had people come in from all over, East Coast, everywhere. So, but this wasn't about me. This is about you.
Well, I guess I better stop asking you.
No, that's fine. I'm just kidding. But what, and by the way, this is my Helping the Brave podcast hat. I'll get you one of those. Yeah. But it's about how we can help vets wherever it is. And I wanted to put one of these on everywhere. It was supposed to be the inaugural one, but not the only one, and not just to come back to Modesto, but let's do one on the East Coast. Let's do some in Texas. Let's do it all over the place. And we know how to put it together. And I wasn't trying to make, it's not that big of a deal. It's just getting the right people in place to do it.
Well, let me jump in there. Would you be interested in doing one out here in my neighborhood?
Yeah, but I'd like you to come to one of ours first.
Yeah, so I'm on the 29th of this month. I'm in Rolla, Missouri. Okay,
That's Missouri.
I got invited out there from another group of vets. one vet puts on the events, these music veteran bands that play and so on. Been doing it for a bit. Another one's invited me to, or asked me to host a couple podcasts. So, you know, I've been kind of kicking around with him. They're trying to grow that veteran band event. And I said, man, I got contacts over here from the casinos out here and so on. But you know, it's kind of part of what I'm trying to do. And the way you're talking is, if you're going to help people walk fire, it would seem to me that it would be a precursor or a lead in to doing what is part of my mission statement. And that's getting fellow veterans to tell their story.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
That's all I want.
It's hard to kill yourself if you're telling somebody and you feel like somebody's listening to your story. You know, I firmly believe that a reason among a lot of reasons that the suicide rate of veterans is so high and is skyrocketing is in part because we don't talk. Right.
That's two reasons. We don't ask for help. And I always tell them, okay, when you were pinned down, did you call for air support? Yeah.
What the hell?
Yeah. What the hell is the problem then?
Wow. You know what? I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
I've been saying it for 2.5 years, dude.
Right?
Yeah.
Pardon me?
It's so I've been saying it for 2.5 years. It's just so easy. I look at it, it's like, okay, you would do that. Why aren't you doing this now for yourself? Oh, I can deal with it. No, you can't deal with it yourself. And you just need somebody to talk to, and other veterans is a good thing to talk to. And you know, and I interviewed a guy who did a lot of stuff with bands, and he had on a Roku and a few other things. Is that the same guy? Doing the band things?
Out of Nebraska, Missouri.
Oh, dude.
So I'm new to these guys. I've only met him. I met him on a podcast here.
What was the name of the podcast?
Do you remember? Hero Stock.
Okay.
Hero Stock.
I think it's the same people. I think I interviewed them. I'd have to go back through and look, but I think I interviewed them also.
Yeah. And Donald Dunn. He's doing a lot.
Donald Dunn, because he had the duck in the background of his podcast.
I had one of my recent articles published on Addie's magazine, Addie's Veterans magazine, with Christine Walker. Have you bumped into her yet?
Mm-mm.
Man, I'm telling you, she's doing a great job building a hell of a magazine, and I do mean a hell of a magazine, Veterans magazine. And inside of that, she constantly reruns the Operation Deep Dive, which which at that point it was an 8-state report investigation, and I'm kind of losing my train on where I was going with that, but the Operation Deep Dive talks about veteran suicide, and it puts a real number on it, and it even uses the VA's bogus report of 2017. 2017, where they claim veteran suicide decreased to 17 per month, and 13 of those were by gun. Okay, which is all bullshit. This report shows that 2.4 times that number is the more realistic number, which bumps it up into the 40s. Yep. Hence, my number of 50 a day in my corner is still extremely low, because again, the VA only deals with approximately 30% of all veterans. Okay, if you're not inside the VA system, you don't get counted in whatever fuzzy math the VA decides to use for whichever report. But Addie's mag with Christine Walker, she's a Navy corpsman. She did Gulf One. She was in Gulf One.
Is that Christine Walker? Right?
Christine Walker at Ease Mag.
Can you introduce us? Yeah,
I can connect you to it after this if you want. Please. Great person. Just talking with her earlier today.
Please. I'm trying to get more involved because I'm tired of what I'm seeing. When I got out of the Navy, I ran away from it.
Me too.
Yeah, it was just but I don't know if San Diego didn't love their service people.
Hey, so my first time seeing a sign that said "Sailors and dogs keep off the grass."
And I try to explain to people, it's like they didn't like us. They didn't want us down there. You didn't want to look like you're in the military, or you got into nowhere in the, whatever you were trying to do. And so I didn't look like I was in the military. I had longer hair and it was bleached and everything else, but it was a different world back then. But then after 9/11, now everybody loves us again. I mean,
Yeah.
but it's still, you were talking about VA earlier. They actually were processing migrant stuff instead of processing veteran stuff.
Yes.
And
Yes.
people don't understand this, and we need to get that word out there more. There needs to
Yes.
be a better way getting that information out to people because it's ridiculous.
Yes. The $6.8 billion that the VA was given last year to solve this veteran suicide problem. Okay. The only thing I've seen that's come from that $6.8 billion, I was on with Colonel Manis, who's in his show, and he showed me a clip of the VA's, tell your story, which caught me off guard. Okay. Because I said I was the first time I've ever seen it. And he goes, no, this is the VA's promotion to get veterans to talk. And I'm like, well, that's certainly encouraging, but herein lies the problem. They can have the greatest message in the world, but do you as a veteran trust the VA? No.
No.
So if you don't have trust, you can't have a marriage, you can't have anything, right?
Well,
Trust is a cornerstone of anything in a professional setting,
trust.
right?
Well, the thing about, we trust people so much too much as a veteran, right? We do.
Oh
And
God,
then,
yeah.
yeah, and that's why these companies with veterans in their name, and that's all I'll say, take advantage of vets. And you have to be really careful with that out there.
So that's funny you bring that up. I spent 10 years as one of 8 nationally elected executive board members of the Vet Force. Okay. The Vet Force represented over 300 service organizations, American Legion, all of them. Okay. For veterans entrepreneur, that was their focus. When 109-461 got passed, the amount of corruption that was flooding the space was unbelievable. There was no, if my child said she was a disabled veteran, they would hand her contracts. Okay. There was
They wouldn't
no
verify.
accountability.
Yeah.
So retired Master Chief Hesser pulled me aside and said, listen, we brought you down here because my uncle did 2 tours of Vietnam as a Navy SEAL. This was the big 5. Okay. Rick Weidman, number 2 at VVA. Right. That was the power. We were the board. Right. Well, he said, I've assigned you, okay, to be my investigator. I need you to go out there and investigate the fraud, waste, and corruption inside the service disabled program. I spent 10 years doing that, where, I testified at trials and I wrote victim impact letters, and I worked with a small group that hand fed the prosecutors and the district attorneys all the people committing corruption. Put one guy in jail for 30 months who stole 40 or $50 million in contracts. Wasn't even a vet. And I did that for 10 years. So I know the fraud inside, outside, and surrounding the VA like few do.
Yeah. I mean, and it's sad. It doesn't need to be taken, that's like the event I put on. One of the things I was worried about is some of the people involved with it that were not veterans, that would take that message, what we did, and put their company information in it. And they did. And I was not very happy.
Yeah. When retired Colonel Michelle Gardner, she's still I think she's an SEO, an SEO at VA. When she was assigned to run the CVE, which would become the verification arm of the service disabled veteran owned program, she invited me in to do a lecture to talk to her staff about the importance of what their mission statement was, to make sure that, if they got the CVE, the VA certification, that it was a legitimate veteran that could owned and controlled and operated the actual business. So, there's a lot to it. And again, the skin that I wear doesn't show the true number of scars that, that I've earned from the myriad of ways I've helped the veteran community.
Wow. That's why you write books, right?
I got to tell you, I had no interest in writing books. I barely get out of high school. I don't read well to save my life. I can't spell to save my life. Okay. And, I couldn't tell you the difference between an adjunct professor and an adjective, right? I don't know the difference.
Well, let's go back to the first one where you say you don't spell well. You know what the difference between a good speller and a bad speller is?
Computer.
A good speller knows when a word is spelled wrong, and a bad speller has no idea that it's spelled wrong.
Well, based on
But
the
you can
amount
look
of
at
red
those words
lines.
and go, it doesn't look right. That's a good speller.
Okay, well, then I'm a great speller, because the amount of red lines that come up on my Word document when I finally figured out how to use that, right? The only
Yeah.
thing I did was I knew how to type. I could type like a bat out of hell, but other than that, I had no. Not only did I have no interest in telling these stories, who the hell wants to listen to my stories, right?
Okay.
That was my
Now you
position,
sound like a vet who doesn't want to talk on one of these podcasts, because who wants to
right?
hear my story? Everybody wants to hear your story, because
Right?
there's so many out. If you tell your story and you only help one person, you've done your job. My firewalk, I only cared to help one vet. That's all I was working on. One vet is worth 30 grand, more than 30 grand to put on an event. I don't care. Your life is worth way more than that. What you're going to do and how you're going to help people down the road, it's way worth it. So if we just focus on helping one veteran by telling your story, that's what you need to do.
Yeah. Yeah, and I had my come to Jesus moment, because there's no way I was going to be able to, get vets to talk about their trauma and their lives and their story if I didn't have the courage, to stand up and expose my deepest, darkest secrets, right? The things that you don't really talk to anybody about, but I've put them in the book. I went back and wrote a book on my childhood and the traumas and the abuse that I went through. And that I was homeless at 14, and there's a lot to telling our story. There's a lot to it.
I smiled when you said that about childhood trauma, and that was not like a snicker. It was because of from doing all these podcasts. Everybody who has PTSD, 80% of them have childhood trauma. It's from me interviewing them, from just because some lady was like, "Did you know this?" And I'm like, "No, just from listening to people and asking questions." Because normal people do not go in the military and run towards danger. Only people who have issues from their childhood, who had to overcome it, do that.
Yeah, well,
And so
we make great soldiers.
yeah, that's why I'm also through the firewalks trying to get, besides helping veterans, I want to help veterans' families, because
Yes.
if we can get to the veteran family, they'll be less likely to join the military. Not that we wanted a lot of that, but they won't be so focused on just trying to get those people. They'll try to get everybody in the military and have to do that. And we need to get back to a real military, not like we have right now, because this is ridiculous.
Oh,
I thought
I hear you.
I remember my grandparent and my dad, my uncle, saying how bad the people are in the military when I went in the 80s. And I was like, what are you talking about? They're like, you can't. And then my son was in, and I went to his boot camp, and he told, with the stories I heard about the females and everything else, I was like, you got to be kidding me. It's an army of individuals. It's not an army of one anymore. You can't run it that way.
Oh, I'm with you. I'm with you. I firmly believe that, the the by the middle part of November, okay, you and I, guys like you and I, are gonna have some serious decisions to make. Serious decisions. Which way is this country going, and which way are we going? Right.
Right. Well,
Somewhere
yeah.
around mid-November.
Yeah. You just have to vote the right way.
I'm
Vote your
talking about
button.
post. I'm talking about post vote.
I
Okay.
know, but they still got to do the first part.
Oh, I agree.
The
I agree.
problem in my county, this last election, 19% came out to vote. The election prior to that 2 years ago, that was only 58% came out to vote. That's the problem.
Well, yeah, that is a problem, isn't it?
Yeah, because if you're not coming out to vote, because people don't think their vote counts, and the whole thing we talked about earlier about inflation, nobody understood that at the last election. They thought, what are you talking about?
Have you been following Scott Presley?
Mm-mm.
So Laura Trump took over as co-chair of the
Mm-hmm.
Republican Party, and shortly after she did, she brought in Scott Presley, who's now sporting 1.5 million, 1.7 million followers on Twitter. He was out there hustling his butt off, signing up folks on behalf of the Republican Party. Okay. He is signing up hundreds, if not thousands and thousands of people every single week / month. Okay. He is doing an unbelievable job of getting people out to vote and filling the ranks inside the Republican Party.
Good, because if people really researches the parties, they would understand that the Democratic Party is the slave party. Go back in history and you will see that they own the slaves. President Biden was on the floor doing a filibuster in 1960s to stop the civil rights movement that was trying to go through. That was all trying to be stopped by the Democrats. Why would you vote that way? I'm just a question. I'm sorry.
Oh,
I'm on
listen.
talk radio on top of everything else I do. So
So I'm if you ever looking for a guest on talk radio, I've done a number of shows there. I enjoy that. But anyway, yeah, I
but
say
I
to
just
people,
learned to be able to talk my mind and don't care.
right? I try to ask people some simple questions like, are you familiar what the lead up was prior to World War II? And depending on their answer, like say they say, well, yeah, and they say, then what do you see in a straight line for what the lead up was to World War II to what you're seeing right now in the last 20 years? And if they kind of just look at you blank, then I know where I stand. But if you watch the Nazi Party and you watch what happened post World War II, okay, and then you watch the line that happened from post World War II to now, and then you go back and look at, do a layover, look at what happened from the end of World War One that led up to World War II. Okay, all the same. It's all but identical in everything except name. Okay, and the Democrats have been doing nothing except lying, stealing the money, and keeping people in poverty. Because if you keep them dumb, if you keep them stupid, then they don't. What do you do? If you can't read and write, how do you move forward? Right. So if you keep them from being educated, informed, and wise, and what did Biden say? They're going to put you back on the plantation, or they're going to put you back in chains, or what did he say? I'm listening to this and like, I'm going, man, this is regression. This is going backwards. How is this helpful? Okay, I grew up with people of all colors, right? I was in the submarine corps and we had gay people on the boat. Okay. Nobody fucking cared. Nobody cared then. Nobody cares now. But when you want to dance around and, flash your stuff to my grandchildren, listen, I got a problem with that. Okay. Let a kid be a kid. Santa Claus and the Easter Bunny for as long as it can possibly last. You got plenty of time in life to, understand how hard the world is and what you got to do to survive.
And if they keep us segregated and
Yeah.
fighting against each other, calling everything racist, I mean,
Yes.
then they can do whatever they want because we're fighting against each other. But I've
Yes.
talked to so many people, and I don't care what color your skin is. I don't care. My dad was a bigot, so I totally understand what that means to be a racist. And luckily, when I was 12, he died of hairy cell leukemia, because if he didn't, I would have been a totally different and probably more of a son of a bitch than I'm already am. But because he was brutal, he was there was no spare the rod. He beat the shit out of us.
Well, then you're gonna enjoy 2,442 Steps to Crazy, because
Yeah.
that book gets into what it was like to be, abused child, and getting people to talk about their past is critical to moving forward.
Yeah, I mean, I was nobody knew anything about me until I got on radio, started my podcast, and now everybody knows everything about me. I mean, I had a deviated septum repaired, and I guess the doctor came out and told my wife he must have, when he was like really young, had his nose broken. And I remember that I was in the back of a car and I spilt something or dropped something, and my dad backhanded me and broke my nose, but they didn't take me to get it fixed. So there's you're smiling, but I'm not. It's like, you know, so
I lived the life.
yeah,
I
you understand.
lived the life.
And
Okay,
I try to explain to people
that
that's
star right there is from a clock radio when I was 11, 10, 9. Okay, I don't remember the clock radio. All I remember is waking up and I was stuck to my pillow as the blood was dripping off of me, and no idea what happened. But my nose was busted, flap over. Oh, I know the life.
Yeah, it was not and that's why I said luckily. But a lot of people who went to Vietnam had PTSD issues and never dealt with it. And they took it. How do they deal with it? They beat the shit out of people, or they did something else. And that's a problem. We need to fix these people. We need to have them. that's why I'm all about, you know, whatever happens with somebody, there is something in their life that caused that trauma to get them to do that. We need to deal with that.
Yes. Yes. You're saying it perfectly. You're saying it perfectly.
I wasn't trying. I was just trying to say it.
Yeah. Again, you and I are products of post Vietnam. When I talk to people, I got to do exactly what you do and say, listen, prior to 9/11, people did not like veterans, period, full stop. Okay.
Mhm.
You didn't tell people you were a veteran. Post 9/11, everybody fell back in love with veterans. Well, guess what's going on right now? The curve is coming back the other way. It's only one flag and one protest away before the, free, right, becomes jail veterans. Oh, wait a minute. They're already doing that. Right.
Yeah, because well,
Okay.
it's basically like that one movie where the Russia came over. What was that back in the 80s, and then they remade it in 2000s.
Dawn.
Red
Red
Dawn.
Dawn.
Yeah, that's basically they. Oh, were you part of the Boy Scouts? Wrap them up. Are you part of this? Put them over there. Those are all military organizations.
Yeah, how ironic is what's going on right now with that movie? Compare that movie to what's going on right now.
Yeah.
Right.
Well, you brought up Hitler, and a lot of people don't realize how Hitler got his people together. Is there were migrants who were brought into the country, and they were turned into his SS people and his special things, and people don't understand that.
If you look at the parallels between what you just said and the democratic machine, okay,
I
how
don't
many
have to. I know it. I know
how,
this is what's going on.
how many suicides can the Democratic Party be tied to before it's actually considered murder? Right. Right. How many
Yeah.
whistleblowers for Boeing have to have things going well, right? And then all of a sudden they leave a hearing and they commit suicide. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, come on. Come
Look
on.
at
I deal with suicide
Epstein.
every effing
Epstein
day.
committed suicide. Whatever.
Right.
Yeah. It's just people need to wake up and see. And we kind of got way off against your from your story, but people need to wake
Well,
up.
I don't necessarily agree because the frustration of what we fought for, let me say it different. Let me try to resay that. The frustration that we feel as veterans because of what we're looking at as what happened to our country. What in God's green earth did we volunteer to, put our lives through hell, not just for a period of time, but for our entire life, to have our country so fouled up, so screwed up by these people who, like you said earlier, are shoveling money to other countries while we are just begging for table scraps to help house and feed our veterans. And just stay focused on the veterans for a moment. The
Right.
veterans, when they're housing and giving away more money. I'm a 100% disabled vet. Okay. I watched how much money they're giving away to illegal aliens. It's more than I get in my disability check. Okay. Now, my rating says that I'm unemployable. I can prove to you I'm unemployable, right? So I'm getting the maximum amount of money and they're getting more, right? My housing isn't paid for. Wait a minute. They're getting access to free healthcare in the private sector. Okay. Yeah. That frustration is a key part or maybe a part of veterans suicide. You can't get kicked and kicked and kicked and kicked. Sooner or later, and I'm going to ask you to pay attention to this. Sooner or later, that German Shepherd that Hitler had is going to turn around and bite somebody. Wait a minute. Hitler did have a German Shepherd
Mm,
that was biting people. Why does that sound familiar?
they had two
Anybody else
different
know
ones.
somebody who had a German Shepherd who was biting, say, Secret Service people?
She had two of them.
Right? How
Yes.
about Hitler? So again, how many parallels do you need before a conspiracy becomes is it conspiracy or is it synchronicity? Right? What's going on here? How
Yeah.
many other people, how many other world leaders have you ever known that had a German Shepherd that was religiously biting people? Now, why does a dog bite somebody it doesn't know? Abuse? Yeah, sounds about right. Okay. We know Hitler was crazy. We know he was abusing the shit out of anything he got his hands on. That's history. Well, why is Biden's dog biting everybody? I don't know. How many more examples do we need?
I mean, we could go on about January 6th and all that other bullshit, but we'd be here for hours.
I
Um,
hear you.
And dude, it was really nice to get to know you. We got to stay in touch. There's a lot of stuff we can do together. I just know it. So if you need help
Yeah.
on anything you're doing, let me know. And but I really would like to scrap the VA and just get the, the health care for people.
Well, I'm going to table something. I'm reorganizing what I'm calling Vet Force 2.0. Jim Ferguson from the UK connected me with some guys. He's willing to jump in, do what he can. But we've got to follow the things that the folks from the Vietnam era taught me, and that's how to fight in an apolitical way, which is exactly what I learned in 10 years of being a key part of Vet Force. So I'm going to table it right now, and I want you to think about it. But I'm going to need key and critical players who have, the pieces that you have, the business experience, the life experience, and so on, and the connections and the voice, so that we can, and the determination, because there's not a lot of people that are willing to quickly see the same things I see, where the VA must be completely dismantled. The second, what is a VA? 800 million, 600 billion, 800 billion a year, second largest agency, second only to DOD. We got to carve this thing out, and I've got great. I have a great plan on how to do it, but I've got to put the machine in place. So, I'm gonna call on you to step up and be part of that board, so that one great thing that I watch Vet Force do, every cent, 100 cents on the dollar, got exactly where it was going. We all paid our own way, never took a dime, never asked for a dime. Even the coffees that came in were paid for out of pocket.
Well,
Anyway, I'll be reaching out for that on you, and let me make whatever contacts I can for you too as well.
no, I appreciate it because and whatever you need to get that word out, because I don't know if you know anything I do thousands and thousands of hours of video. So that's all I do. I still
All
do
right.
mortgages, but I enjoy talking to people and getting the word across. So
Well, I keep hearing I'm supposed to have my own podcast, and I keep getting offered. Well, I've got some offers to host some, but I don't know the format, especially the way you do. So
it's
I'm
easy.
still
It's so
still
easy. What
relatively
we
new.
could do is do a multi-person one of what's going on, because that's what when I first set up helping the brave, we had 4 hosts, and then it slowly weeded down to 2, and then just recently back to me. So which is
Okay.
okay because I like to have a conversation, and I'm different at having conversations. I listen to what you say and go back to what you say and key off of that, where a lot of people, they want 12 questions and how to answer these 12 questions. That's not how you do a podcast.
Yeah, I kind of like your approach. I've been on a number of them where, look, I set a goal of 200 podcasts by the end of the year, and that's strictly to get the message out on veteran suicide. Okay. So I've been in as wide ranging as they can be. And I like this. I like this format, particularly, if we can get family members or veterans to call in and start telling us about their story, okay, and let it kind of grow from there. I think it will be highly successful.
I know how to do that because what happened here. So when I did my radio show, which was live for years, but when the pandemic came, they closed the studio over the weekends. And we could never do it anymore. And so in order to do live shows, there's a program out there that you can get on and have the calls come in through that, and you can take live calls while you're on air.
Oh, is that something you'd consider?
Sure. Yeah. I'm
Yeah,
open, man. I'm
I'm
trying to do more with vets as going forward. Like I said, I ran away from it, came back to it, and now I'm only focused on helping veterans buy houses. I mean, doing that whole thing. That's what I'm focused back on. And it's not like it because I want to get more VA, veterans loans to put in my pocket. It's not that. I want to help more vets because we need more help more than anybody else. Because
well.
and when you're talking about what they're not giving us, I had this cartoon on as my PowerPoint on at Rotary, and I had a lady reach out to me and said I was doing hate speech. It was the cartoon that showed a homeless vet with a sign behind his back that said "homeless vet" walking up to the migrant counter to get all the free shit.
Hmm.
Yeah, and I'm like, that's not hate speech. That's what the problem we have. You didn't understand what I was stating when you saw that. So,
Yeah, did I just lose you?
no, I'm here. I'm still here. You
Oh, I
there?
think I screenshot it. But no, I'm with you. I have a very low threshold for people that want to jump in and tell me how wrong I am when they don't even know, they don't know the first basic thing about me. So, I'm sick to death of, it's no longer homeless, it's rehomed or unhomed or whatever. Let's stop telling me how I can and can't talk. Okay. I'm not listening. I'm here to help vets. That's my mission. That's my calling. I've done the business life. I've done a lot of things. Okay. Writing books, writing articles, and putting together, something. I mean, I've reached out half a dozen times to Tucker Carlson. Sarah Carter's following me now. That was a blessing. I love that when she hopped on, and Scott Presley is following me. So, I'm getting kind of the momentum moving along. All right, but it's a tough message. Veteran suicide is a cringe-worthy message when you ask people, or I say it to people. That's their first reaction. And my part of my mission here is to make it as commonplace as "thank you for your service."
Just so when at my first meeting of Rotary, this year, I should say, I went over the whole suicide rate and how much it was, and people had no idea it was that much. And that is the little number. And like you said, it's way more than that because they don't count everybody. And that's what I was trying to explain to them. I said, since 9/11, it is more than the last 3 wars put together.
Yes.
And I said, but it's really more than that. But if you just look at that, that's ridiculous, because people complain about a few thousand people dying in a last war when we have that all the time now with veterans.
Yes.
And they didn't track this back to Vietnam. Could you imagine how many people really committed suicide since Vietnam and other places?
Yes. Yes. I'm ass deep in everything you're saying. Yes. I tell people, if you, from the time you were born, if you live to 80, you are going to be alive to witness no less than 1.5 million veterans committing suicide. Period.
Wow.
Period. That's 50 a day times 80 years. Okay. It's 1.5 million veterans committing suicide in your lifetime. And again, it could be 3 million, it could be 5 million. If we don't get answers to this problem, if we as veterans, VA is not going to do it, government's not going to do it, we have to do it. Okay. If we don't, look, you don't even lose you're not going to just lose those generations of veterans. You're going to lose the country. Period.
Yep. And we need to get more veterans in politics.
Yes.
Period. Yeah.
Yes. And we need more of the veterans that are in politics right now to turn back around and get their asses to what we're doing. I just sent a tweet to Senator Hawley, who's from Missouri. And I said to him, listen, we got this event on June 29th in Rolla, Missouri. Okay. You're formally invited. Tell me what time you'll be there. We'll make sure we're holding a coffee for you. Okay. So again, I'm putting as much out there as I can possibly put out there. Again, I keep reaching out to Tucker. You want to help me out? Send Tucker, get all your folks to say, Tucker, we need D. Paul Fleming on your show so we can get the mass population informed about veteran suicide.
Yep. All right, D. Paul, thank you so much for coming on the show today. I really appreciate you being here, and I want to do a lot more, so I'm there.
Outstanding. It's been great. I'm honored to be on your show, and it's a pleasure to meet you. An absolute pleasure. I look forward to doing some things with you.
I appreciate that. If you like what we do here, just go to our YouTube channel, subscribe. That's Helping the Brave. And again, thank you, sir, for being here today.
Outstanding.